Hi everyone, actually, no, I'm not gonna make another Fantano joke here. In what is probably my first album review in months since November of 2022 when I reviewed Nate's last album, Caught in a Web and Smiling, I'm now gonna be talking about his brand new album, Elusive Vices, which was just released on SoundCloud and YouTube yesterday. As I said, Elusive Vices is the very quick and experimental follow-up to last year's Caught in a Web and Smiling, which is an album that I consider to be one of Nate's more focused and cohesive projects to date, as most of the songs follow a similar style and theme since the album is about his relationship and his current love life and all that kind of stuff. It's a project that I think is one of his best to date in terms of execution and performance, so I was very curious and surprised to learn that this new album was going to be taking an entirely different approach to anything he's ever done before. I can't lie, I was also a bit skeptical. I wasn't ready to stray away from how I've always known his music to be. When I think of Nate the Space God, I think of projects such as Falling in Winter's Detour and more recently The Evil, as projects like that are more directed towards his own influences and inspirations for making music, and it's just the type of thing I'm used to hearing from him since he's always been labeled as a rapper. When I learned that this new album was going to be taking an entirely different approach to everything he's ever done, instead focusing on more underground elements such as weirdcore and rave and 8-bit and even grunge at one point, I was very nervous that soon would finally be the day that I tell Nate that he has finally released an album that is below average. However, I'm very happy to say that I once again don't have to worry about doing that because Elusive Vices is a genuinely ambitious and interesting project that is, while very different and might not be for everybody, it still does a great job at what it's trying to do, just be completely experimental, weird, and off the walls energetic, while still retaining some very insightful and heartfelt themes about feeling alone in the world and being forced to accept things you're not ready to accept yet, and the creepy and eerie vibes of a lot of these tracks piggyback off of that very well for the most part. It also helps that Nate always manages to give a very meaningful and energetic performance in every track, which helps me slightly more appreciate the things I found myself turned off upon from first listen. I guess without any further ado, we're gonna go ahead and give each of the 9 tracks their own little focused and slightly biased reviews, so let's go ahead and get started. Blood Runs the Ends functions as this album's opener, and right off the bat, we're greeted with some very eerie and off-putting synths that automatically make you feel anxious, like something crazy is about to happen. Strengthening that feeling is Nate's low-pitched spoken word delivery about having this weird feeling inside of you and you just need to let it out, since you can't really actually explain it. This could mean a lot of things, whether it's sadness or anger or
gleeful murderous rage.
Anger feels a lot more fitting though when Nate begins rapping with this aggressive and serious flow about eating all of the fakes and not giving a fuck about what anybody thinks in the end, which kind of makes me think that he had that sort of sentiment in mind when creating this album, that, you know, he was nervous to create it because he was worried about what people were going to think, but then he soon realized that he doesn't really have to give a damn because it's his music. The beat, while kind of basic in terms of your typical synth trap type beat, is completely excused by Nate's realistic and impactful performance, followed by a very unexpected but energetic transition into low-ended rave music that kind of makes you wonder just how experimental this project is going to be. While this type of thing isn't what I normally listen to, Nate sells his performance enough to make me want to come back to it. The themes and topics feel very realistic and very fitting for the type of vibe this album is going for, and while it's not my favorite song on this album, it works enough as an earworm of an opener, so I can respect it. Illicit Love takes a step back from the aggressive and hard-hitting nature of the opening track, instead focusing on hitting more emotional and sympathetic beats about feeling uninspired and empty and not knowing what to do about it. The closest thing I can compare this song to is the background music on one of those nostalgiacore videos on Instagram, because the song genuinely made me feel that uneasy and nostalgic feeling towards events I've never really experienced before. The pitched vocals that are fronted by this eerie but calming, dreamy piano type beat almost give me this sort of acid-induced dream feel, where your dreams are just so outlandish and random and sometimes a little bit too much to process when you wake up, and Nate's more toned down and woozy performance works really well in making this song feel like a sleepy cough syrup induced coma. I definitely consider this track one of the highlights of the album, as it just achieves that calming feeling I strive to feel before I go to sleep, so good on that. Elephant Tongue is one of the more raw and introspective cuts on the album, where Nate ditches the whole 8-bit and chiptune aesthetic to focus on finally explaining these indifferent and confusing feelings that he was having on the first 2 tracks, and explaining them in a way that feels super valid and understandable and touching, sharing similarities with this song Chewing Powder in that regard off of Falling in Winter's Detour. He has a bit of a personal music therapy session when he talks about these feelings over this darker, more underground type beat that shares similarities with the opener as well, that works as both an immersive listen and sort of a metaphor for tapping into your mind and exploring the endless, echoey abyss that it can be sometimes, especially with these lyrics. I don't think that was intentional, but that's how I look at it, and it makes the song work super well for me in the end. Nate has proven that he has mastered the art of honest and thoughtful lyrics that make you feel like you really know the guy as well as someone close to him might. Dry the Water Cold is an interesting one, to say the least. There are a lot of genres I never really expected Nate to tap into on any of his projects, and grunge is no exception to that fact. These weird, distorted grunge melodies play over a drumless mix and are fronted by Nate's high octave and psychological performance that allow me to definitely appreciate something new outside of any subgenre of rap, but I would have much preferred a more gritty and aggressive performance over such a raw instrumental like this. It doesn't bother me too much, but it doesn't quite scratch that heavy emo grunge itch you get from bands like Nirvana or even old Green Day. I didn't expect perfection since Nate doesn't really listen to rock as far as I know, but I would have liked something a little more raw in the end. Where the song really shines though is this transition into the standard weirdcore 8-bit trap type thing with Nate's signature braggadocious and boastful lyrics. While I think it's one of the rare elements on this album where the experimentation doesn't feel all that cohesive, the reason it works for me is because Nate's performance is sold with enough of his expected hip-hop energy that shows he's never going to stray too far away from his roots. This is sadly the song I consider my least favorite on the album as of right now, but I do appreciate and respect the hustle and ambition. Contrary to the last track I just talked about, Drive to Morrow Valley actually currently stands as my favorite project on this song so far. The track opens with this relaxing lullaby-type piano melody that feels very reminiscent to something you would hear in a fancy restaurant or even an old western saloon, and he once again mellows out his vocal performance with a soft and mellow cadence, whereas songs like feature the more aggressive and bitter side of dealing with your emotions and feeling some sort of anger towards yourself for feeling these ways. This song is a much more sympathetic and moralful portrayal of feeling sorry for yourself and sorry towards anybody who suffered collateral damage from your emotions. The sad nature of this song's style really adds to the meaning and feeling of the lyrics and Nate's performance as a whole, and his vocals changing from human to computerized with each line almost feels like the computer talking to the alleged serial killer. It's all kind of confusing, but this is a really good song and it definitely stands as my favorite on the album so far. Gold-Plated Bones puts more of an emphasis on the funk and rave side of this album, which obviously provides a ton of energy and allows Nate to show influence from some of his favorite funk songs and artists that you might hear him listening to in the car. However, I'm not entirely sure if this song does much for me in the end. While I do respect the fact that this song is probably one of the most experimental and different tracks on the album, I just never found myself very attracted to the whole funk thing. This one just feels pretty basic and dime a dozen when I think of all the other funky rave songs I've heard on edgy Spotify playlists 1,000 times. Though this doesn't mean I think the song is bad, it just isn't for me. However, where the song does show glimmers of hope is once again through the transition that adds way more exciting and bombastic weirdcore trap energy and really feels like this type of style should have been the entire song. It feels much more inspired and much more like the song is coming from a personal place rather than a cheap inspiration, which I can always respect. Sadly, this song didn't make my favorites either, but I respect it enough to not have to skip it if it comes on, so at least there's that. Ego Only Cares is a song that I was not expecting to sound as professionally mixed and produced and mastered as it does, but when I heard this track upon first listen, I was honestly pretty blown away by how tight and masterful everything is put together. In this track, there's a piano that ever increases in volume and background vocals that feel like more and more are getting added as the piano rises in volume and power, and it really adds suspense for the ridiculously badass transition that goes into this heavy, saturated, almost Scarlord type beat with all that distorted and in-your-face instrumentation. The fact that Nate was able to keep his standard performance style sounding great over such a demanding beat like this is incredibly impressive, especially when the song feels like it successfully dives into the more edgier side of things that were present on songs like Elephant Tongue or Dry Water the Cold. One of the reasons this song is absolutely landing in my favorites is just because of how well done the production and mixing are in this one, especially his performance. Nothing sounds muddy or vapid despite how much is going on in the instrumental. It all just sounds very professional and well put together. It's Finally Over is the second to last track on this project, and it essentially serves as a brief pause to really let you collect yourself before we end this album once and for all. If anything on this album once again gives me that eerie, nostalgic, almost uncanny feeling that something weird is happening, it's absolutely this song. The distant and woozy computerized background vocals feel like an extra burst of nostalgia and chill behind this weird digital synthesizer that sounds like it's being played straight from outer space. I think the song symbolizes, of course, the end of the album, but also finally coming to terms with these feelings that you're having and almost accepting your fate. That's why I think this song feels as calming as it does, since you finally accepted your fate and you're now free from the torturous shackles of this universe. Now you're just floating around endlessly without a care in the world. This song, while just kind of an interlude, is very, very nice and is definitely one of my favorites. Coming in with the last track on this project, we have Call It Even, which honestly just feels like a 2-minute cry long for help in a very sad and devastating way. In this song, Nate talks about openly hating himself and feeling sorry for his own existence, and when you have lyrics like this, sung by a guy who used to feel insecure about his singing voice and now utilizes it a lot more to very emotional and wowing results, it feels incredibly heavy in a very almost concerning way. Top that with the sustaining rolling bass trap beat backed by a powerful and impassioned choir. This song just feels very raw and powerful, more so than some of the other cuts on this album. While emotions were being explored plenty on this album, they were never explored to such a heartfelt and emotional degree like on this song, in my opinion. I really feel what he's getting at, and it makes you wonder just what kind of things he might have had to let out when he recorded this track, and this album in general. Also one of my favorites, easily. So at the end of the day, what do I think of Elusive Vices? Well, I can see this album being very divisive towards his hip-hop fan base that's been around for a while, sort of being the Scream 2022 of Nate's music career. However, I am genuinely impressed and amazed with how much effort and ambition was put into this project and just how experimental it is, let alone your 12th project. Most people would have given up by then, but Nate continually proves day by day that music really is his passion and that this is something he sees as a form of escapism and therapy, and it's really felt in these songs for the most part. While not everything on this album lands for me, I still enjoy a lot of what is offered on it, and I can see myself coming back to a lot of these tracks very easily. 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you guys so much for watching my very long review of Elusive Vices. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see me do in the future, because I'm pretty much open to anything on this channel at this point. Until the next one, my name is Zero, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.